And back of me, above, is a model of the B-36, also known as the Peacemaker. This is the largest propeller-driven airplane in the world. It was originally envisioned with the start of the war in Europe, and the idea was that they would develop an airplane that could go all the way from the United States all the way to Germany, drop bombs, and come all the way back. It had a capacity of carrying 4 times the amount of armament, bombs, as it were, as a B-29. With the need for materials to build the B-24s and other fighters and B-17s, they stopped the idea of production. But when the war in the Pacific ginned up, then they started thinking more and more about building the B-36 because of the long distances. They figured they could stage out of Hawaii, fly all the way out to Japan and all the islands and all the way back. It had 6 reciprocating engines. They're 4360 Wasp engines, and then they added on jet engines later. The combined horsepower of this airplane was over 40,000 horsepower. The original models featured a 15-man crew. Later on, because the airplane could fly so high, they usually flew it at 40,000 feet, and the reconnaissance version went up to 50,000 feet. Top speed was probably over 400 if they wanted to. It could sustain flight for 40 hours. And some of the crews that flew these airplanes in the Strategic Air Command carrying nuclear weapons, they were on nuclear alert from 1949 to 1959. So it had a 10-year lifespan in essence. There were made 384 of them. Only 4 remain. They're at the Air Force Museum, the Museum of Flight, Castle Air Force Base, and Pima Air Museum. The wingspan is 270 feet and 170 feet long. At one point in the reconnaissance version, they put in 4 different containers for people who were doing reconnaissance at the points they actually did fly over Russia and China with the airplane because of the very high altitude they could go to. Towards the end, they actually came up with the idea of a nuclear-powered B-36. They put in 4 tons of lead between the cockpit and the back of the airplane to house this nuclear generator. They did actually use the nuclear engine in flight, but they didn't hook it up to actually fly the airplane with. There was never a war, never involved in any war. It was called the Peacemaker. A lot of people think that because of the fact that the way of this weaponry that could go so far, that it did deter nuclear war. Never flew in combat. There was one other version of the B-36. It was a single airplane. It was called the XC-99. It was a cargo version of the B-36. It was unbelievable how big it was. I think they could carry 1,000 troops in it. A little supplemental thing with this airplane was they had a 43,000-pound bomb they could bomb. They call it the earthquake bomb that they developed, and they could carry 2 of these bombs. And the idea was it would be such a massive explosion it would cause earthquakes. Off of the coast of Mission Beach, nearby, there was a crashed B-36. This was in August of 1952. The B-36s actually were built in Texas, but they came here to California to put armament in them. Not armament, but electronics gear. This one was on a test flight. They had taken off locally, flown for about 4 hours, came back, and on final approach into Lindbergh Field, the number 5 engine fell off the airplane. It was not under observation. I guess they could smell some gasoline. Someone noticed a wisp of smoke, and the result was the engine caught fire, fell off the airplane, and it crashed off of Mission Beach about 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles out. I'm not exactly sure. And it's a depth of 250, 300 feet. The crew members, 7 of them made it, 2 didn't. One was the pilot who stayed with the airplane. Be sure and visit our museum, and you can learn more about the B-36.